Hey everybody, my name is Home/Henry. Welcome to the More/Henry channel, my second channel where I cover content primarily related to the Pokemon Go Championship Series. And today is going to be a good one. Today, I am joined by the one and only Inadequance. Now, I mentioned in quite a few videos I'm one of the casters for the Pokemon Go Championship Series. Well, so is Mr. Inadequance, but he doesn't just stop there. He actually has, is it 3 regional championships now, including 2 back-to-back this season. And we're going to be talking about probably a topic that's near and dear to his heart, which is the fact that in the Tales of Transformation season, it really felt like tournament after tournament of Tales of Transformation, Pokemon that are not considered the best, like, for hyperbole's sake, you could call them bad Pokemon, but the more accurate term would probably be anti-meta Pokemon, and Inadequance is well versed in that, as all 3 of his regional wins came with Giratina, which I don't think anyone would call top meta but him. So, welcome in, Mr. Inadequance. How are you doing today?
Thank you for this splendid introduction, Henry. I'm excited to be here and that we talk about this topic, because I do think you make a good point on what you state there. And I also think there's a good explanation for it.
I am very excited to hear about it, because I really feel like a lot of the times when it comes to preparing for tournaments, people have a little bit of worry of they will find something anti-meta, but they'll have worries in terms of like, okay, but if I'm bringing this, I feel like I'm making it more difficult for myself to win. I'm like fighting with a hand tied behind my back because I'm running something anti-meta, because in previous seasons, they really weren't winning. But I have a pre-prepared list of some of the Pokemon that won tournaments during the Tales of Transformation season. And I feel like right after Worlds, when we had heard the updates, if we heard this list of Pokemon as tournament-winning Pokemon, we would just think people were lying. Lantern, Shadow Giratina. I know you would have believed that one. That one won twice. Bastiodon.
Lantern was Monterey, right?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
Bastiodon won twice. Aphiro won a tournament. Zweilous won a tournament. Abomasnow won a tournament. Alolan Ninetales won a tournament. Him again. And Pangoro, which I feel like is probably the most believable out of the list, just because Pangoro is always at the very least decent, because it's very good at breaking a lot of like teams that use Ghost as fighting resistances. But yes, that list. So kind of the paradox of the last season is, talk to me, because you're obviously very good at building anti-meta teams. That's what you consistently win with. So talk to me about this season, because it feels like team building for this season was a bit of a unique challenge compared to seasons past.
Obviously, I can mostly speak from my own perspective and from my own team building. If you look at my team from Stuttgart, I kind of did it with 4 Pokemon. Right, Giratina and Gastrodon were there, and you know, I've seen comments about you've used this and you've not used that. The way I see it is that in the current meta, it is, I wouldn't say easy. I wanted to say easier, but I think it's more possible to cover the entire meta within a smaller selection of Pokemon. Because the reason why Alolan Ninetales had worked so well for me was because the top meta had a shared weakness, and that was Ice and Fairy, which is, you know, Alolan Ninetales, and you basically only have to cover those weaknesses. You always have that lethal kind of Pokemon that you can pressure opponents with. Even, and I do think also that sometimes a Pokemon does not look threatening, and sometimes it really does. Like Shadow Talonflame, boo, scary Pokemon, deals a lot of damage. Alolan Ninetales, sweet smiling fox, doesn't do anything until I think it knocked out. I kept track of some stats. It had like 11 knockouts in Stuttgart.
Oh wow!
And I believe 8 of them were third. So it really just hunted down. Everyone was underestimating it, right? And I think that's also something that comes with these spice picks. Because if you look, for example, I think a great example is the team of Hikami. I believe it was in Liu. He had that Zweilous and Abomasnow. And what Abomasnow did so well, and Henry, I find it hard to say this because, ironically, it is me who thinks Abomasnow sucks. It's so bad. It's like weak to everything. Right? You run Abomasnow into a Scissor meta. I mean, I ran A9 into a meta. But it's like... Anyway, you get the point. But what it did, Gastrodon was meta. Florges was meta. I think were there also dragons during that time? Regardless, Abomasnow covers that. You had Zweilous to cover Galarian Corsola. So what you saw there, you can protect the core breakers a little bit better than in previous metas, where Pokemon like Drapion, look, Drapion was pretty much impossible to check, and
Yes.
it was almost impossible for neutral Pokemon to counter. I think that the last play Pokemon season, right, the 2025 season, started super strong. We had a Feraligatr and Clodsire meta, I believe. Was that the last season? I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
And it started great. It was like, you have two Pokemon that can beat almost everything, and that means that if you put those two Pokemon on your team, you put 4 Magikarp on your... Well, 3 Magikarp maybe. 3 Magikarp, because you need to bring 3 actual Pokemon. But you put 3 Magikarp on your line of 6, and you always have play. It was like... It started that great, right? But then you come across real oppressive Pokemon. What makes Clodsire not oppressive compared to a Pokemon like Galarian Corsola is that Clodsire does not exert fast attack pressure, and that makes fragile Pokemon shine. When there is a lot of fast attack pressure, fragile Pokemon will not really have a chance. So when Galarian Corsola came in play, you're kind of forced to bring normal type and dark type Pokemon, and then a geezer like me brings Wigglytuff, you know? It just becomes a mess of a meta. I think that, you know, I'm not saying that the Tales of Transformation meta is the greatest we've had, but I think that at some point there was less fast attack pressure, or at least the possibility to cover Pokemon with fast attack pressure better than in others, that you can actually run like 4 meta plus like one or two Spice picks. And I think that really came in play with a lot of these teams, right? Fearow was accompanied, I see here, with a Galarian Corsola, Shadowmere, Cradily, Blastoise, like that's just bulk, but also not that much fast attack pressure, especially if you look like a Blastoise. The only thing that really exerts, maybe I'm lying, like Galarian Corsola and Marek actually pretty exerting some fast attack pressure, but it's easier to cover that Fearow. And the same for that Lantern, right? You're weak to ground, but it's easier to cover all of that. But the final reason why I actually really think, right, what I started with, why I really think Spice picks have been working better than the last season, is because it's different players winning. There's no Elam who's winning, right? And with all respect to Elam is a great player, and also like there's no It's Axon that's won yet. Those are great players, but they play the meta. Hikami does not play the meta. Even Doonbuck often plays like a little bit off meta, right? He had a Shadow Primate on there. Zardy plays some off meta. The only real hard meta team I think there was PvP David, and that honestly that whole top cut was hard meta. It was unfortunate in a streak of what was all Spice, but I think it's also just the different people that are winning, and maybe that is because meta players are less accustomed to playing as Spice now.
I think an interesting part of that as well is it really seems like the developers, when it comes to the balancing side of things, have consciously or maybe even unconsciously made a pretty significant change to how they're looking to balance like Pokemon Go PvP, because for a while it really felt like they would kind of build up a meta and adjust it, change things throughout the year, and then after Worlds it would kind of cut down the meta. But this has really been the first time where there weren't significant nerfs after the World Championship, so it really felt like a lot of the time the power level kind of increased throughout seasons. And I know a lot of people were expecting like Mud Slap, Bullet Punch, stuff like that to get cut down, because a lot of the times metas were defined, as you mentioned, by several of these very, very dominant Pokemon. But now it feels like almost the playing field's been a little bit more leveled, not in terms of those Pokemon getting brought down, but more Pokemon getting brought up, so you don't just have the neutral menace that is the Shadow Drapion, which was kind of just able to beat everything a lot of times. And then there was the pocket win in Milwaukee 25, where it was Malamar doing the similar thing, where Malamar's neutrals were so oppressive. And so it really feels like now there is almost not necessarily a set meta 6, which it sounds like a lot of the more meta players had been really reliant on, is even among the meta teams that won, and there weren't a lot of them this season, because there were a lot of interesting teams. It really felt like the meta from one tournament to the next, outside of North America, constantly having a Bastion on meddling, which I really don't want to talk about,
about it.
Yeah, there was a lot more like diversity even amongst what people thought was the best.
I think that me and Hard Jeff winning the first tournaments has been incredible for the development of meta. Because if we run nonsense, maybe he runs less nonsense than I did, but he did have a Gudra and a Lantern, 2 Pokemon.
That's nonsense. That qualifies. That's nonsense.
It's playable. It's playable. They lose to Giratina, by the way. But I think that set a great stand. It didn't set a standard for the meta, actually. Right? It kept people guessing. Do they win with that because it's them, or do they win with that because those are the best Pokemon? And then you see in Pittsburgh, Gastrodon skyrocketed over Shadow Marowak, and then Milwaukee, Shadow Marowak wins again, and now Mudslappers are basically gone because Altaria. Like, it kept people guessing. I think that because we have people winning with different kind of Pokemon, it always kept people guessing what is actually the best Pokemon. Are people going to run the previous champion's team? Because that's something you see a lot as well, and especially in practice tournaments. Getting familiar with those championship winning teams or Pokemon in the first place. So I think maybe that also had to do with it, something to do with it, like, me and Hardjeff setting that standard, but also even Steinar bringing Bastiodon. I mean, maybe that inspired Meteor Valiant to bring it as well. I don't think so, because there's no one in the championship who has used Bastiodon more than him in the first place. But he didn't bring a Fearow, right? And is everyone then like, is Fearow the best Pokemon actually? And then you just don't see it again, right?
It just vanished.
I love
Where did
that.
it go? Yeah.
It's just gone. It's just gone. And it's just like, maybe it was the right call for that exact meta. Yeah. Maybe it was that he had the right calls, he had the place with it that he needed. But it seemed like no one believed in me, in Hardjeff, in Steinar, in Meteor Valiant. No one believed in us. No one believes in Hikami. Pangoro from Gone is gone. And then Doombug Shadow Primate. I think there's only 2 teams that I would consider quite meta on these on this list, and that is just from PvP David, the hard meta team that also made its way into Stuttgart, and the team from Zardy, kinda. It had a Diggersby though. It had an Azumarill, but as crazy as it sounds, in late 2025, Azumarill was not meta anymore.
And neither is Diggersby. Yeah, Diggersby's definitely going against the grain as well.
Yeah, and he kicked off Shadow Dusknoir.
Yes, and Shadow Dusknoir, I feel like actually was one of the meta trends that actually kind of followed. Is there was a lot of Shadow Dusknoir usage. One important thing that I want to note: if you ever looked through the Pittsburgh teams, there was a lot of Shadow Giratina. People believed
apparently,
in you, but they're not you. So I think the highest placement for it was like 33rd in Pittsburgh, and I think Shadow Giratina, it has 3 top cuts this season. There was 1 third place, I believe, from a Brazilian player. And then a bunch of people tried it in oh yes, okay. And then there was a bunch of other people who tried it, and no one else except you could get it to work. So I think people tried it, and then people just went, okay, well, I'm clearly just not inadequate, so I should just set down the Giratina because I can't do what he does.
It's a different Pokemon, right? On the last video I made about Stuttgart, I got this comment saying, you never really use Giratina, and I argued, it's funny, everyone points out Giratina, but did you know I use Gastrodon only twice this run as well? No one's talking about Gastrodon, how useless that was, and it's like, but that one at least has like bench pressure, and that's the difference. I agree. Gastrodon makes your Ufisk shiver, right? You don't want Ufisk, for example, on that Gastrodon. Giratina does the hard check a lot, but what I found about Giratina is it's never part of the plan. It is just never part of the plan. It's just the Pokemon you bring out when they don't expect it. They're like, I could probably run ABA to it, or I don't know this matchup as well. The Altaria probably just wins in 0s and 1s. I can let a Dranclaw go maybe. You can't, and that's the thing that Giratina does that you need to understand. If you play Giratina, you play 5 Pokemon plus a Pokemon that can maybe surprise someone. I think it's unique in that role per se, and I wouldn't say per se that I'm also unique in the way that I played it. I think I just understood what it did, right? I built a team, and I knew what the team was supposed to do, and it was not rely on Giratina. My Frankfurt team did not rely on Giratina. It was a better court there, I must admit. In Stuttgart, it was definitely, okay, the theme is Giratina. What else do I put on there?
But also, I mean, you did have a couple Pokemon that kind of went from the first winning team to the second winning team. Like, I know it was the Shadow Talonflame, and then that obviously ended up getting played more in the second regional just because it was a lot more playable. But the interesting thing to note is when you kind of build a reputation of being the guy who runs a certain Pokemon, is you can almost, as you kind of watched your battles through that second tournament, you could witness the effect it had on the lines that your opponent brought. Because a lot of the time, it felt like they were a little bit seeing ghosts, pun fully intended, of Giratinas that just would not show up. Because I think among the streamed games, I think Giratina only ended up in a bad matchup. I believe it was Snorlax where it ended up getting Wigglytuff. But outside of that, the times that it was brought, it actually put up some pretty good results.
I used it only twice, and it was exactly against Snork. Obviously, it's the first game he did not respect at all, right? And that's what I kind of say with try to bring it when your opponent least expected it. Right, first game, it actually swept his whole team, beat all 3 of his Pokemon. And the second game, yes, he respected it, and it was good. It was good, right? When I rely on a Pokemon like that, and he had the RPS picks for it. But yeah, there wasn't really a lot of reason to bring Giratina most of the time. Not because Giratina was bad per se. I knew it was a third meta. You know, I knew that. So if I get shields down, there was always a thought that was like, if there's third, and I want to play Giratina, I always need to get shields down, so in zeros. The thing is, when A9 and Talonflame just beat 3 and 3, why run Giratina?
Yeah.
You don't need to, because the other Pokemon I have to cover is like Scissor. So Giratina only wins that if I use no if I use no charge attacks and just claw all the way down, come out with 140 energy or something. That's the only way you win Scissor, or they no shield you win zeros. But that's the only way you deal with that. It's just unnecessary. It is just unnecessary. There was definitely a thought that sometimes I was like, if they bring that pesky Stunfisk, I will just bring Giratina, but it's just no reason. There wasn't reason in Stuttgart to bring it. I do think it was okay. It was definitely okay in some of the Pokemon, because I do think Giratina was very playable into Altaria's Stunfisk core, but Alola Ninetales, why would I do that?
Yeah, and it really felt like in a lot of those later matchups, the Ninetales ended up providing such a massive competitive advantage, like in that finals against Colin. And I know it was the winners finals and grand finals, so you kind of got to see the team play it out the first time and build some momentum with the reverse sweep, and then just kind of continue it from there. But it was kind of just realizing that, yeah, I can just kind of spam Alola Ninetales, because it's very, very difficult for him to bring the Scizor, because it's such a big risk. And then I believe there was one of the games where he ended up finally saying, okay, you know what, it's Scizor, and then it just landed at the Talonflame, and it was just there has been a moment in, it was, what was the, it was Utrecht, the special event in which you won 17 in a row to get your first regional.
Yeah, probably.
And then, I remember in that finals, there was one game where he finally was because he had obviously lost a bunch in a row because he had been on the win streak, and he finally was Sandslash beats everything but Talon, and then let it into the Talon. And there was this eye roll, shake of the head, and then everyone in chat's like, okay, so Inadequance is just winning this. He's just locked in. But something that I think is interesting as well to examine is kind of, a lot of the time with anti-meta Pokemon, I think you bring up a very good point, where you and the people who are team building don't go into a tournament saying, I want to make this spice pick work. A lot of it is trying to figure out what is good and then finding something that can break it. You made a really good video analyzing that tournament win and talking about the fact that what Alola Ninetales could do that no other Pokemon could do was that trio of Furret, Altaria, and Stunfisk that were very, very common. And even amongst a lot of the anti-meta Pokemon that are winning, like the Lantern to start the season, Lantern was somehow an electric that wasn't catastrophic into Marowak, which was a lot more common before you ended up winning with the Gastrodon. Yeah, it was also It could beat Scizor with Water Gun, which was very nice. Bastiodon as well kind of broke a lot of the Shadow Scizor cores. And then towards the latter half of the season, it really felt like there was a lot of people trying to target Galarian Corsola, but also trying to target down Furret. Because we have this Wireless, which has play into both. Abomasnow broke a lot of Forge's teams people wanted to see. Pangoro, very similar role as Wireless. And then the Alolan Ninetales with that Stunfisk, Altaria, and Furret trio. How did I almost forget Furret when that was the Pokemon that everyone kept leading to it? But I do feel like that's a very important... I do think that's a very important point to bring up. It's just talking about the fact that a lot of these Spice picks that ended up winning, they were put on teams for purposes rather than just saying, I'm going to enter a tournament with Menchao and trying to build around Menchao when it doesn't beat anything. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but there is a lot of testing that kind of goes into these processes. Like, I remember you mentioned in your video, you had a ton of drafts. So how many total drafts did you ended up having before this tournament? Because I remember it was a pretty significant number.
So I had 17 saved.
Wow.
I think that the number that it ended up, it ended up at like 20. I mean, it's normal. When I went in Rayquaza, I had like 24 drafts. So sometimes it goes to that. But yeah, it's hard to say, right? The Pokemon that you want to build around, how good it is per se. Like Alolan Ninetales, I think it's much easier to build around than a Rayquaza or Giratina, because it's a Pokemon that actually significantly covers the hard meta.
Yeah.
So if you put like 3 Scissor answers or Talonflame answers on there, Alolan Ninetales probably can put in work. But covering a Pokemon like Rayquaza or Giratina, you need more than 5 Pokemon.
Yeah, because unfortunately, Rayquaza by itself doesn't really have a lot of meta wins. Like, I imagine even like a Body Slam or a Water Pulse from Gastrodon probably does too much damage to that Pokemon.
It does a lot, yeah. The irony of it all in Utrecht was that I actually should have played it more, because a lot of people played like Drapion plus Fire, or even face a Drapion plus Jellicent. That is exactly what Rayquaza was for, but because they have like a Tinkaton on their team, I chicken out.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Utrecht.
So, as I feel like we've had a pretty nice discussion here, you're a bit of the... I would kind of describe you as the anti-meta man. Like, I feel like all of your good tournament performances, you got a medal at an international championship with a Shadow Palkia. On the team, technically it was on the team. We will not talk about its win rate in battle. It was a Pokemon that was on the team. Like a Worlds finalist with Giratina Origin, 3 regional wins with Giratina as a whole. Obviously 1 with Origin, 2 with Shadow Altered. If we had to take a look through this list of Lantern, Shadow Giratina, Bastiodon, Fearow, Zweilous, Abomasnow, Pangoro, and Alolan Ninetales, I need you to pick one non-Giratina Pokemon that you think has the best chance of winning in this upcoming 3 months of competitive season in this new meta. And now, Alolan Ninetales. Okay, talk to me about that.
I already made some drafts with it.
Oh, okay.
it's like so playable with Power Snow buff. You'd think like Gourgeist has Incinerate now, yes, but it's not non-stab. It is not that strong into some ice types. I believe Mindjuk told me that like even Alolan Sandslash wins the 1 still or something. I have to check into that. I do think Incinerate does a little bit more than he might think. But you know, just that it can actually put in a dent now, right? Because Power Snow is equally strong as Shadow Claw, and previously, if we take Alolan Sandslash as an example here, Shadow Claw was equally strong to Power Snow, despite not being the same type attack bonus. So imagine with that same type attack bonus, I think having ice resistance now is going to be actually really important. And that was not really a thing that was around as much in the previous meta besides Scissor. But because you have Gourgeist, I'm not super sold on Gourgeist just yet, but I really like the idea of core breaking Scissor plus Stunfisk. That is the beautiful thing that Gourgeist now does. And if you remember, there was this Trevenant Walrein meta. Those two paired just so well with each other. At the time, I think only Obstagoon was the core breaker. Well, Obstagoon is not worse than Giratina right now.
Atrocious, yeah.
Atrocious to say. And probably doesn't even beat Gourgeist, because Gourgeist doesn't even throw ghost type attacks into it, unlike Trevenant had to with Shadow Claw previously. But the fact that that core kind of can come back, it says a lot. I think ice type resistance and damage output is going to be so important, and Alolan might be one of the better Pokemon to do so. When will this be aired, by the way?
So this will probably be aired, I'd say, within a week or two. Yeah. So
Perfect. I have Lapras for my local because of the double resistance from Celio, Alolan and all of that. So that's why I think if I had to pick one of those Pokemon, Alolan easily, just because it has a stronger moveset. Weather Ball buffed last season, Power Snow now. Dazzling Gleam just really good coverage still into like dark type Pokemon. Well, you don't need it for Dragon, and otherwise just neutrally a really strong attack as well. So I think that Alolan probably makes the best case for it. But I must say though, if Ice is going to be too important, we may see Bastiodon show up in Toronto.
Oh no, it is a North American regional, and it's medaled at every North American regional, which brings me just absolute despair, unfathomable sorrow. I was very happy to see it not win Las Vegas because the three-peat would have been too much for my heart in that.
I was rooting for it, dude. I was actually rooting for it.
Oh man, that was but Shadow Primeape ended up taking it. And Shadow Primeape, I was very close to putting on this list, but I decided like it's been good enough in the past that like I don't think anyone would argue against Primeape being an absolute best anti-meta right now. Like it is not like a top meta threat that people are consistently bringing. Its usage isn't very high. So I kept it off kind of out of respect for the Mon, but I do think that it probably could have made its way onto this list just because it's not really a Pokemon that saw a lot of consistent play or consistent success prior to that Vegas tournament.
Yeah, I think in that tournament itself, I think Doombug just kind of did it smart. I also kind of hate his team. I'll explain. But,
okay.
Like, Primeape, I think the main problem of it is Scissor. Because you just die in like 8 Poodle Punches.
It is catastrophically bad.
And that's why I almost have question marks about how did he do it? With a Credilli, Shadow Primeape, and a Wigglytuff on his team. How did he get past all the Scissor? He must have had Talonflame or Stunfisk on them the whole... And even I don't even consider Stunfisk as a Scissor counter, but like that Talonflame must have worked overtime for him. I think I saw like not too much of Vegas because the time zone difference being 9 hours, and I have to wake up very early for work nowadays. But yeah, Primeape. If there was no Scissor, I think Primeape would be meta.
That makes sense. Yeah, I feel like a little bit is where Pangoro suffers as well, because it is another fighter where at the very least if you have Annihilate can at least go toe to toe with like shadow counters and bullet punches. But like these karate chop fighters, they just don't have the fast move pressure and they don't have the bulk. So Scizor in the least shocking turn of events just clicks shield and then just farms through you, and then they still have like a half health Scizor and a ton of energy, and that can be very, very difficult. But I mean, something like Alolan Ninetales, you were able to find a way to make that work, even though that is the most catastrophic matchup we've seen in the championship series against Shadow Scizor. But you were able to just put a lot of just bench pressure and making something like Alolan Ninetales, which I imagine people may have thought about for a split second and then just been like, that's just going to end up on a Scizor. But being able to correctly support these picks, I think can also be very, very important, because that's why a lot of these Pokemon, they're able to win one tournament, but we don't really see them winning again because they had the correct supporting cast for that particular tournament. But obviously, once people see it, they might consider it a little bit more in future tournaments. Like, okay, if an Abomasnow won, I'm going to make sure that I'm not like catastrophically 5 times weak to Abomasnow, or I'm going to make sure I have checks to Bastiodon. Because I feel like Bastiodon in particular really ended up catching a lot of the Pittsburgh players off guard. Like I remember, because I was actually casting that tournament, as the day progressed, people would get lined up against the Bastiodon, and then because they had heard at this point that Bastiodon was on his team from stream, and they would say, okay, I have 5.5 things that lose to Bastiodon, so like I'm in a lot of trouble here. So I think sometimes it is just the right meta call, but being able to correctly support that spice pick once you've kind of identified something anti-meta is very, very important. Like I think a battler who was very, very good at this in previous metas and won quite a bit with it is a Palasha over in Europe, who obviously got several wins with Magnezone. Obviously not this season, in previous seasons. but being able to well support Magnezone and kind of make it difficult for opponents to bring the things Magnezone didn't want to see, and then Magnezone ended up feeling pretty free.
Yeah, it's just part of team building. It's really just part of team building, right? And again, referring once again to Doombug's team of making Primeape work. If you compare it to like my team or how Paula played that, if you play Magnezone, you do not play another Pokemon weak to ground, or not as excessively weak as Magnezone is. When you play a Alola Ninetales, you do not play another Pokemon excessively weak to Scissor. And I feel like that's kind of really where that difference was to make some of these Pokemon work. And again, makes me wonder, how did Doombug get away with it? When he has 3 Pokemon that Scissor puts 1 shield and just like ramps through, right? But yeah, I do think it's very possible, but you just need to think about if you use a Pokemon that you intend to use as that core breaker, but it's so weak to that one meta Pokemon, make sure that you're not even weaker to that same Pokemon in your other picks as well, or it's either going to just make it look like you're playing, for example, 4 versus 6. For example, if I have 2 Ghost type Pokemon, right? I run Dusclops, Dusknoir, or Dusclops, Giratina, whatever. And then I have 4 Pokemon that can beat Furt, but don't hard defeat it. Let's name a few. I have Talonflame. I have Empoleon. I have Abomasnow, and I have Azumarill. Let's say I have those 4, right? Really cool that I have these Ghost type Pokemon, Henry. They're going straight into the bin.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
they're
unplayable. Yeah.
Because no Furt is always coming, right? You need to make sure that Pokemon that you want to make run so bad, that it's covered well. You need to make sure it's not coming, or you bait your opponent into having that one Pokemon. That's most of the Basti teams, right? You don't even play Bastodon half the time, except if you're Valiant. But like your opponent 5.5 times weak to Bastodon, don't play Bastodon. Just bring the 3 ground type counters. Probably trap it somewhere, right? It really just comes down to when you are team building, that you need to identify your weaknesses. And honestly though, just scrim, just practice, right? You'll find what someone like Henry will play to destroy my Bastodon line and make me reconsider life. It's just those kind of things that help you either change your mind entirely or make one small adaptation that makes it more playable.
Do you think that the fact that there are more Pokemon at a higher level now makes it a little bit easier to kind of support these anti-meta picks? Because I know a lot of the times you are simultaneously trying to cover like the Pokemon that you don't want to see. Like for Alola Ninetales, you really want to build strong to Scizor, but you also want your other Pokemon to kind of cover the meta by themselves, so that way you can still, if there's a matchup where let's say the Ninetales or a Giratina is unplayable, then you still have playable Mon. So do you think that is a little bit easier now that like the overall power level is higher?
Again, I can really only speak from my own perspective there, where I found that the top meta had just a shared weakness, and that made my Spice pick just more playable. But for example, if I want to play a Magnezone, for example, it would be an entirely different team, and would have played entirely different too, right? I would need to play like Magnezone plus 4 Stunfisk counts, and maybe then that Spice pick will be more playable. But it's really top meta dependent. And I remember, like team building with Palkia and Rayquaza, especially the Palkia team was just like, whatever, I can't break Azumarill, Drapion, just throw in whatever. Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
like right now, for me personally, the top meta in Stuttgart was way easier to cover than for example the EYC meta, where I just ran 3 RPS Pokemon in Gastrodon, Talonflame, and Wigglytuff, right? And I just align well. Although I can't give it that few credit though. The Talonflame actually put in a lot of work there. But yeah, it's just kind of what the top meta is looking like. If the top meta is unbreakable, 1, you have a bad meta. You have a bad meta. And 2, if the top meta is unbreakable, it's hard. It's really hard to play Spice. If Azumarill and Drapion defeat everything, maybe just run like 5 or 6 Pokemon that don't lose to both of those. Like that has been on my mind before. Maybe that was for Utrecht as well, where I run stuff like, I think I ran Blastoise to have play into both. I had my own Drapion and that kind of stuff, because it just really depends on top meta. Like I was lucky, well, not lucky maybe, but I did identify a shared weakness, managed to cover that, and that way it worked. But if it was Scissor Stunfisk top meta, maybe it would have been a very different team that I brought.
Well, I definitely appreciate hearing your insights today, Inadequance. Where can the people find you?
That would be, I am sometimes live on Twitch. Nowadays, not so much. I'm very busy with sailing on RuneScape. I mean, work, of course. I'm working most of the time, and then filling in free time. Not so much with Pokemon Go anymore. I just play Show 6 forms, not so much Go Battle League. But when I do, I guess I'll stream on Twitch. I often make YouTube video, also more resorting to Show 6 storyline videos rather than Go Battle League. I'm also on X. You may find some of my GBL team graphics there, which I've also share often with Ishikawa Boy and Rice. I'm also on Blue Sky, but I don't use that as much anymore. So I guess those are the 4 platforms I use.
Hey, well, thank you so much for joining me, Inadequance. I figured when it comes to talking about anti-meta Pokemon suddenly winning everything, it'd be hard to get a better guest and a more qualified guest to talk about it than you. Because every time you win, it's with some and I say this with love, some crazy nonsense. So you definitely,
I don't disagree.
You've definitely established yourself as someone who's very good at anti-meta team building. So I think hearing your thoughts and hearing kind of being able to pick your brain about why it worked in this particular meta, I think can be very valuable for people, whether they're tenured competitors or if there's someone who's done a lot of Go Battle League and is looking to kind of break into that space. So I definitely appreciate you joining me today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Henry. And you know, yeah, I definitely agree. There's no harm in calling it bizarre nonsense or whatever. One of my favorite lines that I've heard from Speedy is he trolling? Is he just trolling at this point? And you know, sometimes you just gotta have fun with it. That's the most important part to keep yourself motivated, right? If you don't have fun, you're not gonna put in a lot of effort, probably. And I have fun.
Hey, well, I don't think we can end on a much better message than that. So thank you so much, Inadequance. Thank you to everyone for watching, and we'll be back soon.